Boom, 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 boom! With the Rolly Stone with the Rolly, yo! What is up, guys? Welcome back to episode 4 of the Fundamentally Sound podcast. I am Jared, here with my brother Zach, and we're here to talk everything NBA basketball. Zach, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. My basketball team's doing better after the trade deadline.
Bucks have been hot.
Lot to talk about. The Lakers again are continuing to roll. Luka looks more comfortable, and the Mavs just seem to be cursed at this point.
Yeah, let's get into it right away with probably the biggest piece of breaking news. Was that from 2 nights ago now?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, Kyrie Irving done for the season with a torn ACL.
Yeah.
Looking at the Mavericks right now with Anthony Davis, who's out right now with a groin injury, unsure if he's going to be back the rest of the season. Kyrie for sure done for the season. What are your thoughts on how just like this Mavericks season has seemingly just been absolutely thrown in the garbage the last month?
Yeah, I mean, I saw something last night, that Cuban did, 25 years he built up that franchise, and Nico tore it apart in about a month. It's just like obviously injuries happen. That's just part of basketball. Like, the Lively injury sucked, but then you go and you trade Luka, and then AD had a really good his first half, and you're like, okay, maybe this team can make a playoff push, make another finals push. Like, yeah, your window is significantly smaller, but at least you have a chance this year. And then AD gets hurt, and it's just such a not weird thing, but like, relatively AD was healthy the past couple years in LA. You know, after they won the championship, he had played like 60 to 70 games. Like, he was pretty healthy. And then he comes to Dallas and just is injured right away, and there's a very good chance he probably won't play, especially with Kyrie out. And then Kyrie, who's never experienced any kind of knee injury, any kind of serious season-ending injury like this.
Well, he did in the finals that one year.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, yeah.
Like, other than that, he's been, like, relatively healthy. Like, you can rely on him pretty much every night. And he had been playing increased minutes. I don't know if that had anything to do with his injury, but it was kind of like, if you watched it, he just kind of like hyperextended his knee.
Yeah, I mean, that's most ACLs. It's just a non-contact
most
thing.
ACLs, but you kind of hope for it was just going to be some kind of strain that he was going to be out a couple of weeks or something. He did end up shooting the free throws, which was cool to see, but yeah, they wrote him out for the rest of the game with a knee injury or knee sprain, and then the next day confirmed a ACL tear. So now they're relying on PJ Washington and Klay Thompson. So
but that's the thing though too. You look at the rest of their injury report. Lively's out with a fractured ankle. Yeah. Gafford's out right now because he's hurt. Jaden Hardy got hurt the other night. PJ Washington's out right now because he's hurt. Exum is hurt. Caleb Martin's hurt. Like, besides like Klay, pretty much their whole rotation, all the guys that they would have relied on come playoff time are like out with like various injuries right now, and like it kind of seems like, at least from the outside perspective, they'll probably end up shutting AD down the rest of the season.
I think that's probably the best plan, because like they're not really sitting in a prime playoff spot, and if you don't have guys that can go win you a playoff series, then what's there's
especially in the West
point. Right.
Yeah, but no, it's crazy how quickly like their season went from being a game away from going to the finals and winning a game, maybe being a piece away from contending for a championship, to now just absolutely blowing that team up. I think I saw a stat that like out of the 9 guys that logged like 45 plus minutes in the finals last year, they're all like injured, traded, or left in free agency. Like, the team is just so completely different.
Yep.
And I don't know. I just don't know how you take that drastic of a pivot when you literally went to the finals last year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like not only is their season like completely flipped, but like that franchise as a whole, it's just like going from, like you said, a piece away, like legitimately, like okay, like this was a. Not only did we make it to the finals, but we were like Luka was hobbled, like he was not healthy. So if you can get him healthy and put the right pieces around him, and again, you don't need that you like need specific players. You just need like more like a Klay Thompson, like that helped, more shooters, more defense. Like Gafford was coming into it. Like Gafford was really solid. Lively was looking really promising, and it's like it's not like you're old. You guys are a fairly young team. Like Luka has his point. I mean, Luka's a point guard, but he has another ball handler in Kyrie. Like you could have made it work, and you could have like think of this situation now if like Lively is hurt and you have all these injuries, but you have Luka. It's kind of like you can rely on him to keep you guys afloat until you guys get healthy, and then if you're like a 6 or a 5 seed, like you can work with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean now it seems like they're probably just going to be tanking the rest of the year. I would think,
Yeah.
and just kind of try to get the best draft pick you can, and then kind of cut your losses and hope for the best next season with everyone healthy. Um, but on the other side of the coin, the other side of that trade, you have a team like the Lakers, who have
Yeah.
been one of the hottest teams in the NBA since they got Luka. They're all the way up to the 2 seed now. Um,
But again,
like,
that's a very close West race, so like,
yeah, but also it's just like the identity of that team has changed so much too. So they went from a team that barely shoots any threes to a team that's, I think, the second best 3-point shooting team coming out of the All Star break, right behind the Celtics, and also has been the best team in the NBA defensively, which I think
that
is shocking,
you know,
especially because, I
because
mean, we talked about it.
Luka can't play defense. Remember?
Right, and well, and there were the concerns with trading AD and
Yeah. Yeah.
not getting Mark Williams, that they're not going to be able to defend inside. They're going to be a liability on the defensive end. But you see here, since the All Star break, these last couple weeks, first in defensive rating, they're top 5 in opponent's field goal percentage. Like, they just have been gelling super well, it seems like, which makes sense
Mm-hmm.
when you have two of the best players in the world on your team. You shouldn't need a whole lot of other help, and it seems like they're pretty quickly putting the
Yeah.
pieces together.
Yeah, like even last night, I mean, it was the Pelicans, so take it with a grain of salt. But Luka had 38 and 15. LeBron had 34, 8 and 6. Like, this was the most points they've given up since the All Star break at 115. Um, but yeah, like you said, just kind of like we both were. I mean, a lot of people were probably like, no Mark Williams, like their interior defense is going to struggle, and they've. I think it does help a lot that they can um, punch teams in the mouth right away and put up 30 to 40 in a quarter in the first quarter, and then teams like, okay, we can't go inside, we got to shoot. And then you have guys like DFS and Vanderbilt that are really good perimeter defenders, and then they're just kind of like they're chasing the Lakers almost every game. It seems like everybody they've won 7 straight now. They haven't. I mean, they had a 3-point loss to Charlotte, but they haven't lost since the All Star break.
Yeah.
So
Like, I think, and two, you got to think about the fact they're up to the 2 seed now. Um,
yep.
with how they've been playing, it looks like they should be able to secure um, a home a home playoff series at
Mm-hmm.
least in the first round, if not the second round
Depends
also.
because they'll be fighting the Nuggets pretty much the whole
Right.
way. Kind of the
But
Grizzlies are right there too, but
but
yeah,
see, that plays into their favor, I think, because it's like what, the last 3 years they've been bounced by the Nuggets now.
yeah,
Um, but now if they could maybe flip the script, and even if they face them in the conference semis, now they're flipping the script and then they get home court advantage. Like it could be a whole different series. And obviously
Right.
you add Luka. I think it's going to be a tough defensive matchup for whoever has to guard Jokic on that Lakers team. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be a tough defensive matchup for whoever has to guard LeBron and Luka also. So
Yeah.
I think
That's where that Thunder series gets very interesting if it
if
gets
they
there.
make it that far, yeah. Yeah, well, and plus just the experience of LeBron and Luka up
Yeah.
against the lack of experience that the Thunder have.
Yep.
Um, I mean, obviously, we talked about how they got some playoff experience last year. The Thunder
Mm.
have obviously been able to gel together and put it together, even though they're the youngest team in the NBA. But
Yeah, and I think like LeBron and JJ talked about on their podcast last year is how, especially LeBron knows like how much the game slows down. He's like the first couple rounds are like talent can beat can you can get beat by talent, but
yeah,
as you get in those later rounds, it's just like guys that have been there before,
mm,
and the game slows down exponentially. And you have this Thunder team. There were probably guys in the Thunder team that they're still kind of like not say deer in the headlights, but this is still like a learning experience for them. And
yeah,
Luka and LeBron, it's not.
yeah.
So
And
it
I
could get
think
interesting.
I think that's what I love so much about a 7 game series. Um, Especially in basketball, is that I think that's a great point that like talent can definitely will you through the playoffs early on, and we've seen that before.
Yeah,
The Pacers get hot, they make it to the conference finals.
and then
The year the Bucks won, the Hawks got hot, and they made it to the conference
yep.
finals. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like it can happen, but with the structure of a 7 game series, having to go through all the rounds, through all the um, like other top teams to get to the finals, I think by the time you get to the finals, you truly do have the best team in the West versus the best team in the East. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's going to be really interesting. I was looking at the standings today and like how many teams currently are in like the high 30s or more for wins, and like we could easily have like 13 teams across the NBA winning 50 games with how hot some of those teams at the
Yeah.
top have been. We could have over a third of the league winning 50 games.
Yeah.
And, the playoffs, that would be super awesome for the playoffs. It'd be super competitive, especially in the West, um,
Mm-hmm.
where like you could even potentially see two 50-win teams matching up in like the 3 and 6 spot.
Yeah, it all depends because right now, I mean, Nuggets and Lakers are both at 39, Grizzlies at 38, Rockets at 37, and then you go to the East, like Knicks, Celtics, Knicks, Celtics, Cavs all have 40 plus, and then Bucks, Pacers, Pistons all have 35.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just significantly more talented at the tops of each conference, and I think if you look at like the top four in the East right now, I think those four, and the Pacers could get interesting because they have been there before. But then once you get to like Pistons and down below, it's like I mean, you could say the Hawks have been to the conference finals, but they're so different, such a different team
Right.
than what was there a couple years ago. But yeah, you have those top teams that are so weathered and so veteran, aside from maybe the Thunder. But I think the Rockets are kind of like, even though they're good, we're like, okay, they're gonna win a playoff series, and then maybe that'll be it. But all the teams in the East, like those four, are so experienced. Like champion Celtics and Bucks have both have a title in the past couple of years. The Knicks are, I mean, the only thing that kind of not scares me, but like Tibbs, how much he wears his guys out for the season. I don't know how much that's gonna affect them in the playoffs, but it's like I think that could be a problem. I don't know, but
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Because I mean, it definitely. I think for Tibbs teams, it has been in the past. Um,
yeah,
but also, like, I think guys are so, like the conditioning and the recovery is so different now too. Um,
mm-hmm.
you have like Mikel, who's like never missed a game. You have,
Yeah.
like Josh Hart, who rarely misses games, and routinely plays 40 minutes a night. Like they're just, I think, honestly, like this might be the perfect combination of like young, gritty guys who can handle that type of workload in the regular season to
Yep.
be coached by like a Tibbs team.
Mm. Yeah, and I think like you said, these guys kind of expect it. Especially like these guys have been there a couple years aside from like Mikel. They know what to expect, and
Well, Mikel has
I
finals
mean,
experience though too.
he does the finals experience. But again, I'd have to look back to see what kind of like minutes he was playing.
He
But
started.
I, like I mean, yeah, I know he started, but it's like, is he playing like
Oh, like
40
more
plus,
like okay, yeah,
like Tibbs minutes, like 40
right during the
plus?
regular season. Yeah, I guess I
Because
would
I'm
assume Monty
yeah,
probably wasn't running
yeah.
his guys in the ground like that. Um,
And even that, like with the Bucks, like obviously we know Giannis, like he hasn't been held. Even when they won the title, he was not
Healthy.
100%.
Yeah,
So now it's kind of um, his, like they're pulling back on his minutes a little bit. I
yeah.
mean, you saw that coming out of the All Star break and even
Mhm.
before. But that's fine. I mean, if you get to, I mean, you the 3 seeds, I would say it's a long shot, but you're 4.5 back
Right.
of the Knicks. Like you gotta focus more on just getting a home playoff series
Yeah.
against the Pacers or the Pistons, and then I do think they probably win both of those series regardless. But still, I think that is a point where it's like, okay, talent's gonna beat both of these teams
Mhm.
because I think Dame and Giannis and those guys, especially Kuz, like he's getting comfortable, that can um, just overpower a team. And I think the Pistons, even though they're hot right now, they're going to cool off, and they'll be a good playoff team, and this will be a good experience for them. But do I see them beating the Pacers or the Bucks? I don't see it. I don't see it happening this year.
Well, and I think the thing to remember too is like, we talked about those three teams
Yep.
battling for that 4, 5, 6 spot. Whoever ends up losing that battle and getting the 6 seed, like they have to go play the Knicks in the first round then.
Yeah, and then
So they don't get to
yeah.
play one of those other two teams. So that's
Yeah.
why I mean it's going to be extremely important um, for all three of those teams to try to be competitive,
Mm-hmm.
try to lock down the 4 seed, at the very least the 5 seed, and have a better chance at making it to the Eastern Conference semis. Whereas if
Right.
you got to go play a Knicks team who's been one of the better, more dominant teams, especially in the East this year, um, that's a way different matchup than having to go play the Bucks, Pacers, or Pistons.
Right.
Um, why don't we stay on the topic of the Bucks because they've been red hot too, especially coming out of the All Star break. I think
Yep.
they've only lost one game coming out of the All Star
That was a
break.
tough loss. That was a
Yeah,
tough
it
loss to the
was a
Rockets too.
tough 3 point loss to the Rockets. Um, but no, Bucks have been really hot, and a lot of it has had to do with the guys that they traded for. Kuz has been phenomenal, especially on the defensive end. He's got a
Mm-hmm.
defensive rating of 103.8, which is crazy. KPJ is just behind him, 104.2.
He's
And
been such a steal. Like
I mean, the fact that
especially
they gave up Marjan Beauchamp, who already got cut from the Clippers, um,
he did sign a two-way though with the Knicks. I
with the
saw
Knicks.
that,
I
but
saw that, yeah.
still,
But like the fact that the Clippers were willing to just literally give him up for nothing, essentially, and he's already proven to be such a huge asset in the last couple of weeks. Like he's
right. It's,
single
like last night
handedly,
too was
yeah,
like
like he's single handedly won the Bucks. Um, I'd say at least 2 or 3 games just with how clutch his scoring has been in the fourth quarter. Like late in games
yeah.
before Damon Giannis come back in to close out the game, his production has been ridiculous. And then even getting Jericho Sims too, who wasn't playing at all in New York, Like they give him up for Delon Wright, who wasn't playing at all here in Milwaukee, and Jericho Sims has been great too. Defensive rating 105.9, and especially with Bobby being out with his suspension, like he's getting in and he's playing 15, 20 minutes a night to some really good defensive production. Obviously, he doesn't bring the offensive punch that like Bobby does, for example, but I think his like defensive upside has been enough to keep him on the court, and that's I mean what the Bucks have needed. Coming out of the All-Star break right now, Bucks are sixth in the league in defensive rating. They're also top 5 in opponent field goal percentage also. And like you said, they're doing it with Giannis on a minutes restriction. Like the Bucks right now, they look like such a different team.
And it's like last night, it was because I watched the game last night, and it was like back and forth with the Hawks, and then literally like they're down 6, I think. KPJ comes in, hits like 2 and 1s, hits another couple big shots, and then you're down 2 or you're tied, and then you put Dame and Giannis in for the last couple minutes, and then it's like you run that 2-man game, and it's kind of what we thought when those two first got together. It's like you can try to stop it, especially like with Giannis hitting his mid ranges this year. It's like it gets really tough like for teams, because even Dame last night had a bad shooting night, but like playmaking was phenomenal. He was able to facilitate. Him and Giannis have looked so much more comfortable. Kuz hit a big 3, and then they stepped up on the defensive end, and I think that's when it's going to get really important, is in those clutch moments to have, especially a guy like Dame and Giannis that's comfortable closing, plus all the experience that those guys have, and then Kuz just getting more and more comfortable as he's actually playing for something and not just stuck in purgatory in Washington.
Yeah. Well, and even for Kevin Porter Jr. also, I don't know. I listened to his post-game press conference last night. I don't know if you did.
No, I didn't catch it.
But he talked last night about how awesome of an experience he's had the last couple weeks, because he gets to be in an organization that has a clear direction and is contending for a championship. And he said it's something that he's never gotten to do in his career before, and to be able to learn from Giannis, learn from Dame, and be trusted in this organization to play a key role in the team's success. Like he said that this 2 weeks has been like the best of his career. Like he's having so much fun and learning as much as he can. And he said like it really seemed like he like it was a big turning point for him in his career.
And Dame even brought up when they brought in KPJ. Dame has been following KPJ since like his AAU days. Like he knew already he was going to be something special. And I don't have the picture, but there's a picture of like KPJ. I don't know if it's at the combine or some AAU, and Dame is in the stands watching. Like that's how much he followed this guy. And like you said, now KPJ can come in, because the way the Bucks minutes are, like Giannis and Dame sit to start the fourth, right? Like regardless of the score, and that's when KPJ comes in. And just looking at his splits in his last 5, in 12 minutes he's averaging 9-2-2, 2 steals, and then he's shooting 52 from the field and 40 from 3. Like you'll take that. Like that's
Absolutely
all you can ask for.
Like I mean, like last night he had 15 points in 12 minutes. Like that's the
6 for 7 from the floor. Like,
that's the kind of production. Dame goes out of the game, and you're able to bring in a guy who's just going to be immediate energy on both ends of the floor.
And the thing that kind of shocks me is that most of the time, like he'll play a little bit early, but he plays a lot of his minutes in the fourth, and that's where it's like to just come off the bench after sitting for 3 quarters and do what you're expected to do. if not
Right.
more, is very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like looking at the Bucks now, big picture, with the acquisition of him, Kyle Kuzma, who's been phenomenal. Like the Bucks are sitting just outside of top five in pace since the All Star break, which is something that like I don't remember where they ranked before that, but it definitely was not anywhere close to top five, top 10. I mean, anyone who's
Mm.
watched a Bucks game at all in the past, like the team is so, there's so many veterans. They were playing so slowly, and I think
Yeah.
that obviously that was a big reason why they got rid of Chris, um, and went for Kuz is because it's a guy that's going to be able to run the floor, up the pace. Same thing with KPJ and with Sims, who can run the pick and roll, run the floor. Um,
Yep.
like the Bucks, I mean, truly look like a completely different team and a team that's getting hot at the right moment. 20-ish games left to play. Um, if they're able to go out and lock down that 4 seed, I think they're a team that could for sure like match up really well with the Cavs and like make a
Yeah.
run, try to make a run at the finals. And then you got to remember too, also they're going to be getting Bobby back
Yeah.
right before the playoffs, and so that's another offensive weapon that they're going to add to their arsenal.
Mm. Yeah. It's just it's such a different team, like you said. And then you look at like the starting lineup that they throw out most nights that look to be their lineup going forward is Dame, Torian, Giannis, Kuz, and Brook. Like length defensively, like that's a lot for a defense to kind of plan for. Torian's a phenomenal 3-point shooter, and then you can throw in some of these smaller lineups when you put again just pure shooters in the game in Gary Trent and AJ Green, who I've talked about this to you. It's that like I'm waiting for AJ to have an 8 3-pointer game.
Mm,
Like he's such a streaky shooter, and if he just like hit it, just there's going to be one of these nights, and if it happens in the playoffs, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, a couple years in that finals when Brent Forbes had that like heater of a game, a heater of a series against the
against the
Heat,
Heat, yeah.
and then it's just like I could absolutely see him. Or like Gary's been a really good fit, and I still don't understand how the Bucks got him on a minimum.
Hmm.
But their playoff lineup is starting to take form, and then they did convert Ryan Rollins to a full contract, which good for him. And then you obviously have guys like Ajax, whose minutes kind of have been gone now for the most part, but more like has more than enough experience to step in if needed. So they look comfortable. Doc has that locker room, which is another very important thing. So like you said, just going down the stretch, just locking up that 4 seed and getting momentum to the playoff is um, all you can ask for at this point.
So then moving on from the Bucks, I mean, we've talked about the Lakers and the Bucks. Both those teams have been super hot. I think the Kings have been a team that's been sneaky hot also. I think they've won 7 of their last 9, um, going back to right before the All Star break. Um,
Yep.
Obviously, trading away De'Aaron Fox, getting Zach LaVine, then getting Valanciunas right before the trade deadline. Also, they make some changes to kind of revamp that lineup, and it seems like it's been working. Um, they're top 5 in defensive rating, top 5 in opponent field goal percentage. Also, um, what do you think? Like, what are your thoughts on kind of that team as constructed and going forward for like the playoffs?
Like it's such a weird situation because like I like this team if the West isn't as strong as it is, and
Right.
that's kind of what is brutal because you're sitting at the 8 seed right now, and like you're talking about playing like the Lakers or the Thunder or the Nuggets if you make it out of the play-in. Like that's not exactly what you want. But Zach LaVine, he's been great. I mean, he had the other night, February 24th, he had 42 points on 16 of 19 and 8 for 9 from 3. Just a ridiculous game. But a good pickup for them. I do like them going forward. I think they did a good job of realizing, okay, Fox isn't going to be back. Let's move him. Let's not pull a Mavs here and just blow this thing up for no reason.
Right.
You have pieces. You have DeMar's there. Keegan Murray, he's there, but
Sabonis.
Sabonis is just. I mean, he's a walking double every night, and you have guys that you could build around. And just because one of your guys is gone, doesn't mean you have to completely retool. It's just a matter of okay, let's tread water, and then it's not even tread water. I would say you got a better scorer than Fox, for sure, as far as facilitating and point guard. That's obviously what you kind of lose in LaVine, but LaVine he's gonna give you 20 to 25 a night and a really good 3-point shooter. So I think they did a really good job at the deadline, but playoff wise, I don't see much, just because of how strong the West is. I do like what they did and kind of the momentum that they're building. They do play the Nuggets tonight, so that'll be interesting. But I don't know. I'm not bought in yet. And then they had all the stuff with Mike Brown, that was kind of not great. And then you had the issues with Fox and I don't like their playoff chances just because of the teams they're going to run into. But moving forward, looking down the next year and the years after, they should be more than okay if they can find the right coach. I think reevaluate that after the year, and then kind of see what you can do to kind of replace the Malik Monk point guard, build around Sabonis, and I think what they've done has been good, and they should not be ashamed. But I think they're having a good year, but anything more than the play-in, I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but you got to think too. I don't know which picks they own specifically, but they got a decent haul for trading away De'Aaron Fox, and I don't really think they had to give up much to get Zach LaVine from the Bulls in the three-team trade. So especially with how the Spurs look right now, I don't know if they own the Spurs pick for this offseason. But going forward, if the Spurs don't take that next step right away, they could be looking at some decent draft capital in the next couple years too. If the Spurs, don't kind of come into their own with Wemby. But I mean, they're definitely an interesting team, and they're a team that I think could potentially be a couple pieces away. Obviously, I think there's going to be questions about DeMar as he continues to age. But just having LaVine there long term with his contract, and having Sabonis, who it looks like at this point is going to be a Kings lifer. Or at least with the Kings for the rest of his career. I know he was in Indy for the start of his career.
Yeah, but then
But no, I mean, the Kings are definitely a team that, if they make a couple moves, they could for sure be a team that contends, or at least is able to make a playoff run. I mean, we saw it a couple years ago. They finally had that year where they broke out and made it to the playoffs. I think they were the 3 seed that year, right? They just unfortunately they matched up against the Warriors. Yeah, they matched up against the Warriors, lost in 7. But honestly, I mean, the fact that they've been able to stay afloat and stay in contention for the
Yeah.
playoffs now, um, I think is something Kings fans should be happy about. You know, they could have easily said like, we made the playoffs, then we didn't. You know, maybe let's just blow this whole thing up. But the Kings like front office has shown that they're still committed to making this team a playoff team. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. And as far as head coaching goes, too, I mean, Doug Christie, it seems like, has done a phenomenal job since they got rid of
Yeah.
Mike Brown and brought him in. Um, and obviously, former Kings player also.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, spent plenty of time in the organization. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't um, convert him to, the full time head coach going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and that's the thing too. I think like, I mean, yeah, he's done a good job, and rarely do you see that. I think that's one thing. I mean, you see it in the NFL where like an interim, you know, will maybe transition to a head coach job, but honestly, you don't see that a lot. Like you don't see kind of like guys like finish out the year and then they're like, that wasn't the fit. But these guys seem bought into Doug Christie, and definitely, if he doesn't get it, I'll kind of honestly be surprised. But I guess it depends if they even decide to interview anyone else.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. We mentioned just a minute ago, obviously, when the Kings made the playoffs, they lost to the Warriors. The Warriors right now are another really interesting team. Um, with the addition of Jimmy Butler, they all of a sudden, coming out of the All Star break, sitting fourth in defensive rating, top five in opponent field goal percentage. Steph has just gone nuclear since
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler joined the team. I think he leads the league in points per game since Jimmy joined the Warriors. He had that ridiculous game the other night where he dropped 50.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. His 5 game splits is nuts.
yeah, and it's just like all of a sudden, looks like the Warriors have some life in them.
Yeah.
You know, they've retooled with Jimmy. They found a two-way guy that I think they've converted into a full-time contract in Quentin
Mm.
Post, who's having a phenomenal rookie year, shooting 40% from three as a center. Um, and then I think they went and got D'Anthony Melton also, who's a great defender, also a great three-point shooter. And now we're looking at a Warriors team who, once again, led by Steph, and now Jimmy as the second option, I think allows Jimmy to play a lot more freely. And it's a team that's built around defense and three-point shooting. And I mean, we've seen in the past those two things together have won a lot of championships, especially in Golden State. So I think going forward, the Warriors are really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see where they end up seating wise.
Yeah, I think if they can stay out of the play-in, like, yeah,
Where are they
that would
sitting?
be. They're sitting at the 6th seed. Excuse me. Half a game up on the Timberwolves, a game up on the Kings. So that's where it's like, so 2 games separate the 6th seed and the 10th seed right now in the West.
So I mean, that kind of seems like that's a similar
Yeah,
race to like what we're talking about with the 4, 5, 6 in the East.
yeah,
Um, but it's so the I think the difference is though in the West is that all of those teams are good enough to win a first round playoff series.
yeah,
Um,
and that's where home court comes in play.
yeah,
It's like so important.
and even though like we're talking 6 through 10, like none of those teams are in position for a home playoff series. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like there's no reason in the West that we couldn't see a 5 beat a 4, a 6 beat a 3, even a 7 beat a 2, depending on how the seeding falls. Yeah, that's just how strong
Like yeah,
The
like
West is
right
this year.
now, yeah, right now we're like if playoffs started today, your 3-6 is Nuggets Warriors, your 4-5 is Grizzlies Rockets, and then you have what say 2-7 is Lakers Timberwolves. Like that Warriors Nuggets series that's fun.
It's
Like
interesting.
that gets interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rockets Grizzlies, like again, two young teams that
Hmm.
I think like both it's going to be very interesting. So the West is just very, very fun to watch right now.
It's a
And I think
dogfight.
honestly, yeah, like the Mavericks, I think they're going to start falling because of the injuries.
Yeah.
But everybody below
Yeah.
them, they're not making the playoffs. Suns, Blazers, Spurs, Pelicans, Jazz, like they're
Yeah.
not making playoffs.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I guess to kind of round out the conversation, we're looking at talking about teams that made big trades before the trade deadline. The last kind of big trade that we haven't talked about is the Cavs going and getting DeAndre Hunter. And he's played really well from what I
yeah,
saw since he joined the Cavs. Um, Averaging, I think it's like 15, 16 points a game. He started all those games. Obviously, phenomenal defender. Also,
yeah, 32 the other night, 32 and 7 the other night.
yeah. And I mean, as the season goes on, he's just going to get more comfortable in his role at the Cavs. And you're
Mm-hmm.
already talking about a team that was super deep to begin with. Now they're
Yeah,
able to bring him in and plug him into the starting lineup. Um, Truly, I think that could be one of those trades where we look at it and like, say, that's the trade that pushed them over the top, got them to the finals, or maybe even won a championship. Um, his his ability to come in and impact a game like that, like those guys are hard to acquire, especially for what they were able to give up to get him from Atlanta.
yeah.
Um, Cavs are on a 10-game win streak right now, or 11 game, I
11.
think. Um, they're easily the hottest team in the NBA, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see if any team in the East, when they get matched up against them in the playoffs, if they can give them a run for their money. Because truly, I mean, the Cavs have looked so dominant all year long.
Yeah, and like I think I don't know if we talked about this before, but like how surprising the Cavs have been. Like last year we kind of were like, okay, like they're good, but then they just kind of like started out super hot and then they just didn't cool off. And I think it was like, okay, they're just having a really hot shooting like streak, like good first month, and then they just haven't cooled off. Like they shoot just under 40% from 3 as a team, which is insane. But then you add DeAndre Hunter to that mix, and yeah, they haven't been great against. Oh, sorry, that's the Knicks. They haven't been great against the top two teams. But the Cavs, I mean, they beat the Celtics the other day, I think. But yeah, those. I mean, the Cavs, for whatever reason, like people, I don't know why they're not. Some people aren't brought in. They're just like, oh, they think the Celtics are gonna like beat them. But this is such a different Celtics team, and this Cavs team is just. I don't expect them to cool off come playoff time. Like they could, yeah, but
Yeah,
they're just so built so well where I mean you average 123 points a game, like that's not gonna just go away for a month. You
right.
know, I
Well,
and
and I think, I
they
mean,
yeah.
a big thing too, we kind of touched on last week is, um, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago, is just the addition of Kenny Atkinson to that
Yeah.
team. And truly, I think because the Caps started off hot last year too, right? Um, they went
I
on
think
a
so.
run. They went on a run um, before they eventually cooled off and then kind of fizzled out in the playoffs. Um, but now this team's completely different. You've seen Evan Mobley take the next step and become an all-star. You've seen Kenny Atkinson come in, completely revamp the offense. Donovan Mitchell's having another great year. They go and trade for a guy that's a big impact player like DeAndre Hunter. Darius Garland is having a phenomenal year as well. It's just like so many things are clicking for the Cavs right now. Like so many things are working out um, how they should be, how the team wants them to, and they're the hottest team in the NBA for a reason right now. And
Yeah.
I would 100% not be shocked at all if at the end of the season they're the team holding up to Larry O'Brien.
Yeah, and that's for like the East. I mean, is I just I don't know, like people, especially I say people, Celtics fans, they're just convinced that like, oh, we're gonna turn it on in the playoffs, and I'm like, you have teams that if you're not careful, you're gonna lose. Like they can just surprise you, and like yeah, you can kind of like coast to the playoffs now, and yeah, you're gonna probably get that 2 seed, but it's like these teams like I think it's like I'd say like they're the hunt. I'd say not they're the hunted, but like I think last year like with the Celtics, it was like we kind of expected them like okay, you're a really good regular season team, and all these years you've been close. Like you lost to the Warriors, and you've been close the past couple of years. And then the Bucks went out early, and there really wasn't any competition in the East. It's like you should walk to the finals, and without much stress, and then the West is going to beat each other up, which they did. Like the Mavs were beat up coming into the finals, and then that's why they easily won that series. Big part reason.
Yeah, I mean,
reason. And now
yeah,
now you just kind of look at them, and it's such a different situation. Like this is a different Celtics team. Like yeah, Peyton Pritchard's having a better year, but Drew is not the same. Like Derek White kind of is not. I mean, he's good, but like, and the thing too is you gave them all extensions. Like that is so much money put into 4 players, and they're not producing the way you need them to.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point. Like it was such a cakewalk last year throughout the regular season, and then in the playoffs. Um, I mean, you look at the teams that they faced and
Yeah.
the injuries that those teams had. I think there's an argument to be made that it was one of the easier runs to the
Yeah.
finals, and then you get an injured Mavs team, an injured Luka. Um, it's one of the easier championships that I think have been won in recent memory. Um,
Yeah.
but and now obviously this year, sitting at the 2 seed, a lot of people think they're just kind of coasting on the regular season. Um, and that might very well be so. But now looking at where they are in the season, 20-ish games left. Like this is the time when you're supposed to flip the switch.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see if down the stretch here, this last month and a half of the regular season, if we start to see a different Celtics team. Um,
Yeah.
because it's definitely a thing. I think we've seen it in the past from so many LeBron-led teams, where they kind of coast and then flip the switch. But
Yeah.
there's also times where teams coast and then they go to flip the switch on, and
And they
something
can't.
short circuits and they can't.
Yeah.
Um, especially when you've been coasting since October, saying now, all
Mm-hmm.
right, let's go try to flip this switch on. Um, it'll be interesting to see if they're disciplined enough, if the team as constructed is good enough to flip the switch. Because another thing too is, part of the issue. We're well past the trade deadline now. Since they're kind of coasting, knowing what they have is good enough to get them a top seed in the East. Um, if they're not able to flip that switch and get back to what they were last year at their championship level, it's not like they can make a trade or bring a guy in,
Yeah.
because now we're past that point. We're at the point where the roster you have is the roster you're taking to the playoffs, and
Yep.
if Tatum's not able to flip that switch, Brown's not able to flip that switch, if Drew's not able to get back to being the all-world defender he has been in the past, if Derek White isn't able to come back into his own and start playing like the best third, fourth option in the world, I think the Celtics are going to have a lot of trouble in the playoffs. Maybe not in the first
Yep.
round, but if they get matched up against the Knicks in the second round, it's a very different Knicks team. It's a very good,
Mm-hmm.
very strong Knicks team that's been playing hard all season long. Um,
Yep.
and if they somehow make it past them, they're likely having to go up against the Cavs in the Eastern Conference semis, who have been showing everyone all year why they're arguably the best team in the NBA right now. Um, so, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that can be asked about the Celtics. And I mean, we'll have our answers come April, but until then, I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
And I think like obviously the Knicks didn't make a big move like the Bucks and the Cavs did, but like looking at the like so we'll start with the Bucks. Like the Bucks were like they could have very easily been like okay we're just like Chris it's gonna be fine, like he's gonna get healthy and come playoffs and we know like we haven't played with Dame Chris Giannis like we haven't seen them in the playoffs yet. They could have very easily been like we're just gonna wait it out it'll be fine, but they were like okay like we love Chris he's done a lot like he helped us win a championship but we need someone to be healthy. We need a third option that's going to be available every night that can help us on both ends of the floor. And then they pulled the trigger and they got Kuz. And the Cavs could have very well been like, okay, we have the best record in the league. Like, we're good. Like, we know what we have. We've won 50 games, 40, however many games. We're good. But they went out and they got another piece. And like you said, the Celtics are kind of like, oh, we won a championship with this team. This is good enough when all the other teams around you are essentially circling you and tooling up and realizing like okay this is the Boston team, this is a good Boston team that nobody beat last year, and I think it's more than one team that is like that are eyeing them up. And like you said I like with Brown and Tatum it's like can they go for like 30 a night? Yeah. Can they do that like a couple times in a series? I don't know. Like they haven't flipped the switch yet. Like Tatum has had like a couple really good games, but it's kind of like I don't see that. It's kind of like Porzingis hasn't been healthy. Like Al Horford's old. Drew hasn't been healthy, and if you don't get your 35-5 from like Brown and Tatum or around that, I think you're going to have a very difficult time with some of these teams in the East. And then if you somehow make it that far, like these teams in the East, I think are just going to run right through you.
Yeah. So I think another good point to make that you kind of hit on is that Celtics team last year, they set the bar for
Yep.
what a championship level is in the East. And then after they win the championship in June, they give every other team in the East that wants to contend a chance to look at the Celtics roster and say, all right, this is the bar. What can we do to try to match up to them?
Yep.
And now looking at the playoffs and the way that rosters have been reshaped, like the Celtics aren't facing the same teams that they faced last year. It's a much different Cavs team. It's a much different
Not only
Bucks
last
team.
year, but a couple months ago. Like these teams are
Yeah,
drastically different.
yeah, but much different Cavs team, much different Bucks team, much different Knicks team. Um, I mean, even a team like the Pistons. Not saying that the
Yeah.
Pistons would beat the Celtics in a 7-game series, but they're a team that even made some moves and now has gotten hot and could potentially give a team a run for their money in the playoffs, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even sneak into the second round depending on how they continue to play the rest of the way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but now I think, and it's something I touched on too last week. The East is just so much stronger this year than I think they have been the last couple
Mm-hmm.
years. Um, and I think it's kind of been a foresight on the Celtics part, um, that they haven't really like made any moves And
Yeah.
obviously it's hard to because they're so locked into the contracts that they have with their top 5, 6 guys. Um, but they've given every other team that wants to contend a chance to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of saying, all right, well, they're trying to catch up, so we need to make a move to counter, they've just been banking on the idea that their team as constructed will still be better than like a
Yeah.
retooled Cavs, Knicks, Bucks, etc. team. Um, and I think that also puts a ton of pressure on the Celtics too. Um, Obviously there's been a ton of pressure on the Celtics the last couple years because they've been one of the best teams in the NBA. But now that they have this championship, there's pressure on them to prove that it wasn't a fluke, to prove that
Yeah.
um, they weren't just benefiting from a weak East and injuries to other key players on the other good teams in the East. And I think it'll be interesting to see because truthfully, I don't know if they're going to be a team that can even make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, and I think you put an emphasis on like the pressure, and I think the one thing that they're also under a lot of pressure is financially. They're under a lot of pressure. You have so many big extensions go up out to like what Derek White got one, and Drew got one, like Brown got one too. Like Brown and Tatum are both on super maxes. Like you are putting so much money on 4 players where it's like I think you look at like the Bucks, like Giannis and Dame, rightfully so, are making a really like supermax like a lot of money, but then Kuz is making a good amount of money, but not like what Chris was making.
Mm-hmm.
But and then you look at like the Knicks, it's like the Knicks is it's also their first year with these guys. Like they
Right.
went out and they got Cat. Like I don't know
And Mikal.
they probably weren't and Mikal they probably weren't planning to get Cat. Like Mikal like they
Right.
kind of, but like Cat just again is a player that rarely is available, if ever.
Kind of
So it's
fell into
like,
their lap, honestly.
yeah, and it's just like the Celtics. What did they do after they won a championship? Like, I get guys need to get paid, but then you just putting like, okay, we're gonna run this back, and we're gonna think this is good enough, no matter what other teams do, and I just don't see it this year from them.
Right. Well, and I think something to hit on too, financially, is that with all these extensions, you're locked into this core for the foreseeable future. Um,
Yep.
and sure, it was good enough to get you a championship last year in a um, very weak East, but
Mm-hmm.
if it's not good enough to do it next year, this year, or going forward, like how are they going to retool? They have two players on a supermax. Drew making a ton of money, Derek White making a ton of money, Porzingis making a ton of money.
Al Horford's
And
old.
Al Horford aging. Um, Peyton Pritchard getting now an extension, making more money. It's going to be tough to move any of the players to do anything to better the roster because you've committed so much money long term. Whereas a team like the Cavs have young guys on rookie extensions, or a team like the Bucks has aging veterans on expiring contracts where they're going to have money in free agency to replace and retool and maybe get younger and better.
Yeah.
Um, it's just like, yeah, if the Celtics can't prove that this roster as constructed is good enough to continue to contend and make it out of the East, all of a sudden I think you find yourself sitting in a really weird spot where you might be like a top 3, 4 team in the East, but you're not a team that's going to be able to make it out of the East and back to the finals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think Peyton Pritchard, like, he's like played into. I wouldn't say played into his contract. He's had a phenomenal year. I do like he's leading the sixth man of the year. Like he's very important for them. But like you said with the Bucks, like yeah, oh they're old, but like you said, Brooks on an expiring contract. Like all these guys, like Chris, they got rid of him. They got younger with Kuz. Like they're gonna be able to have money now in free agency.
Bobby's
and
on an expiring deal.
There's a lot of players out there. Bobby is. There's a lot of players out there that, yeah, Milwaukee isn't a big city, but they go look at like, hey, there's 2 generational players over there, and like they want me to. They need my help. They would be more than willing to do it, I think. Whereas like with the Celtics, they're like, oh, we can't really offer you that much money because we've dumped $500 million into 2 players.
Yeah.
Just, they got to win it this year. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're under a lot of pressure to win it. Like, whereas the Cavs aren't. Like, right. The Bucks are under pressure, but I would argue the Celtics more because it's like, you're a big market. Like, you're expected to win championships. Let's be honest. Like, you guys, your fans talk a lot for not really winning much. Like, you won one last year. The last time was when the horrible coach in Doc Rivers led you to a championship. So, they're under a lot of pressure, and if they don't flip a switch quick, then I don't see a world where they get bounced first round, but things could be very interesting second round depending on who they run into.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of the Fundamentally Sound Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, like the video. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about next week or anytime in the future. Go follow us on social media, on Instagram and on TikTok at Fundamentally Sound Pod. For my brother Zach, I'm Jared. This has been the Fundamentally Sound Podcast. We'll see you guys all next week.